The destructive impact of anti-tank mines on the battlefield is now well known to everyone. Especially in the conflicts in Ukraine, we have witnessed numerous times how these deadly traps pose a threat to armored vehicles. In today's video, we have compiled the 20 most striking incidents of Russian armored vehicles hitting anti-tank mines since the war began. Stay tuned. June 27, 2023. A Russian BMP-2 armored fighting vehicle moves slowly towards the Ukrainian defense line. As it carefully maneuvers through the dust and dirt of war, it suddenly comes to a halt. It remains motionless for several minutes. Likely, the crew is assessing which route ahead is the safest. The silence is laced with tension. After a decision is made, the vehicle begins to move again. Just as it's about to connect to a paved road, a sudden and violent explosion echoes. The BMP-2 hits a hidden anti-tank mine. The vehicle's body is torn apart by the blast, flames rising. It's nearly impossible for the crew inside to escape. A few seconds earlier, the armored vehicle was moving, but now it's nothing but a burning wreck. Once again, Ukrainian resistance delivers an effective blow with invisible defense lines. In the meantime, you can use YouTube, super thank you, to support us in our content. We need it to continue with our videos. July 3, 2023, Russian forces in an attack convoy move toward Ukrainian positions. Armored vehicles follow a narrow, muddy path through the trees, advancing cautiously yet determined. The tank at the front of the convoy maneuvers to cross a natural obstacle. But at that critical moment, the tank strikes a hidden anti-tank mine. A devastating explosion occurs. With a violent shock, the tank's tracks are destroyed, the turret loses its balance, and the vehicle is rendered combat ineffective. The most striking detail here is the location of the mine. There's no visible road, but the terrain naturally suggests that the only logical passage would be there. It seems like a natural crossing, a safe and suitable route. But precisely for this reason, the Ukrainian defense managed to place a trap there, striking the enemy at its weakest moment. This is not just an explosion. It's the moment a clever defense strategy bears fruit. August 20th, 2023. The next footage comes from Zaporizhzhia, in the south of Ukraine, where the conflict has intensified. A Russian BMP moves toward its mission area with its crew. They proceed cautiously through the terrain, knowing that danger could appear at any moment, but also fully aware that they must complete their mission. The vehicle continues to move steadily for some time. However, the driver then maneuvers and changes direction, perhaps a shorter route or an attempt to bypass a potential threat. But this decision marks the beginning of their end. The BMP, immediately after the maneuver, strikes a hidden anti-tank mine. A violent explosion shatters the silence. The vehicle is suddenly engulfed in flames. Likely, the munitions inside are also affected by the blast, and the explosion intensifies with a secondary detonation. All of them lose their lives at the scene. August 12, 2022. Russian forces come together for a coordinated attack. Two armored vehicles are advancing close to each other in quick succession. They are moving swiftly toward their target. This speed not only shows their determination, but may also be a sign of hidden dangers waiting to be overlooked. The lead vehicle passes through a narrow passage when suddenly the ground shakes. A powerful explosion echoes. The vehicle has struck a hidden anti-tank mine. The explosion tears the armored vehicle apart. Its body is torn away, it is engulfed in flames, and within a few seconds it is completely destroyed. The second vehicle behind it suddenly halts right after the explosion. The crew inside the Russian armored vehicle survives this intense blast. This scene dramatically demonstrates how even a few meters of difference on the battlefield can form a razor-thin line between survival and death. While the lead vehicle is completely annihilated, the vehicle immediately behind it and its crew managed to survive, proving how unpredictable and chaotic war can be. March 17, 2022. This footage comes from a ruined village bearing the scars of conflict. A Russian tank moves through the wreckage of destroyed houses and fallen stones. Despite the silence in the terrain, the tension is palpable. As the tank moves through a narrow street, a distinct rut in the road catches the eye. Perhaps it's from a vehicle that passed earlier, or the remnants of war have created this depression. However, The Russian tank is determined to pass through this spot without hesitation. But this becomes its final decision. Just seconds after crossing the uneven patch, a violent explosion sends it flying. The explosion is from a carefully placed anti-tank mine. The seemingly harmless rut in the road is actually a trap. What appeared to be a simple road imperfection was, in fact, the opening to a deadly trap. This scene further proves how intelligence and attention to detail can be decisive in war. June 5th, 2022. The critical supply routes used by Russian forces to maintain their frontline positions operate as the unseen veins of the war. Ammunition, fuel, and other vital supplies are transported to the front lines via these roads. However, Ukrainian forces closely monitor this activity. With intelligence support, they identify the frequently used routes of the Russians and place deadly traps along these paths. In the footage, a Russian supply truck is seen heading out to deliver materials to frontline troops. It travels along a seemingly empty and abandoned road. However, this road is no longer as safe as it once was. When the vehicle reaches a certain point, an explosion occurs suddenly. The German-made Parm DM-22 heat off-route mine, which has high temperature and penetrating power, hits its target with precise accuracy. In the explosion, the front part of the truck is torn apart. Its engine stops. This attack doesn't just stop a single vehicle, it also blocks the supply lines reaching the front. 29th, 2022. The footage shows a Russian BMP-2 armored vehicle moving toward Ukrainian positions. The road is one of Russia's logistic routes, a well-trodden path that has been used repeatedly. However, Ukrainian forces are aware of the importance of this route and have prepared by placing anti-tank mines in the area. The BMP-2 unknowingly moves toward this trap. Within seconds, a violent explosion occurs. Smoke rises from beneath the vehicle, filling the sky. The force of the blast visibly spreads into the air. The vehicle is almost torn apart. Its systems are knocked out. This footage vividly illustrates the impact of mines, one of the silent but deadly players in warfare. The resistance of BMP-2s against anti-tank mines is quite low. The main reason for this is the vehicle's thin underbelly. By design, it only offers protection against small-caliber rounds and shrapnel. It lacks thick lower armor plates or active protection systems like tanks. Therefore, an anti-tank mine under the vehicle doesn't just target the wheels or tracks, it often incapacitates the entire vehicle. For uncensored footage and the latest updates, join our channel on Telegram. August 6th, 2023. The Russian tank experiences an unfortunate moment in the chaotic environment of war. The tank advances slowly and cautiously, as if anticipating danger. There is a silent activity in the midst of the steppe. However, this silence is broken just seconds later by a powerful explosion. As the tank moves over a destroyed piece of road, it suddenly strikes an anti-tank mine. The explosion shakes the vehicle, one of its tracks breaks off, and the engine system is completely disabled. The tank becomes immobile, no longer usable. But the most shocking part of the event is yet to come. Reports indicate that this mine was not placed by Ukrainian forces, but by the Russian forces themselves, likely during a retreat or as a defensive measure and forgotten. The chaos of the battlefield, lack of coordination, and breakdown in information sharing lay the groundwork for such tragic mistakes. May 9th, 2022. In this footage, a Russian tank is moving through a dense forest. Crushing trees as it goes, the tank advances steadily toward the other side. On the ground, huge track marks and several maneuvers are clearly visible. Though everything appears silent in the footage, the ground has turned into a deadly trap. While the tank is slowly maneuvering in reverse, suddenly, a violent explosion erupts from beneath it. The vehicle jumps off the ground and smoke rises from the underside of the armor, and an anti-tank mine has hit. This is just the beginning. Before the tank can even recover from the first blast, it strikes a second mine as it tries to move again, shaking from another explosion. The two consecutive blasts render the tank completely unusable. The body is shattered, internal systems collapse, and fire breaks out. This double blow leaves no chance for the crew to survive. The vehicle, along with its entire crew, is destroyed. July 3rd, 2023. In the footage, a Russian tank is moving toward Ukrainian positions. Although the road is quite smooth and seems very passable, it is located very close to the conflict zone. However, roads like this in a combat area are often deceiving. These smooth roads near the front line can also be filled with deadly traps, just like in this case. Ukrainian forces do not want the enemy to use these roads for fast logistics and support. Therefore, the roads are heavily mined with anti-tank mines. The Russian tank, unaware of the threat, moves forward with its heavy armor, advancing without hesitation and straight into the minefield. Suddenly, several explosions occur in quick succession. This is not just one mine. Multiple anti-tank mines are likely triggered at once. The intensity of the explosion shakes the ground, and the tank's body is thrown into the air. This combined impact makes the tank completely unusable. Although the explosions are powerful, the crew survives and manages to exit the armored vehicle, gathering their equipment. May 24, 2024. In the footage, a Russian land vehicle is seen moving through a rugged terrain, clearly bearing the scars of conflict. There are huge craters in the ground, broken soil, and blackened spots. This area has witnessed numerous explosions before. The state of the terrain silently carries the traces of war. The vehicle moves quickly through all this chaos with the driver clearly alert, aware that staying here for too long is dangerous. At that moment, Ukrainian artillery fire begins. The sound in the air changes and the whistling shrieks of the artillery shells pass over the terrain. The Russian land vehicle, realizing the danger, increases its speed. The engine strains and the wheels shake. The only goal now is to escape. Just as it seems to have escaped, an unexpected deadly threat from below emerges. An anti-tank mine. The mine under the vehicle triggers a strong explosion, shaking the vehicle. Flames and smoke rise, and the vehicle's body is torn apart. The land vehicle, while narrowly avoiding artillery fire just moments before, is destroyed by a pre-hidden trap. August 16, 2022. This Russian infantry vehicle carrying soldiers continues to move forward despite the open danger ahead. Not far ahead, there are the remains of two previously destroyed BMPs. Burnt armor, scattered debris. Everything here clearly shows that a disaster occurred before. However, despite these images standing there as if they were a warning, the vehicle and its occupants ignore the danger. As the Russian infantry vehicle moves between the destroyed BMPs, it is almost heading toward its own end. And right at this moment, it strikes an anti-tank mine hidden beneath the ground. With the sudden blast, the vehicle shakes, and intense smoke rises. The explosion renders the vehicle completely unusable. June 6, 2023. This Russian tank is moving through the terrain of an abandoned village to attack Ukrainian positions. The narrow streets, ruined buildings, and craters in this area offer both an advantage and a serious risk for the tank. After completing its attack, the tank starts to move forward, but the progress doesn't last long. Only a few meters into its movement, the tank strikes an anti-tank mine that has been cleverly hidden beneath the ground. The explosion shakes the armored body, and smoke and flames rise into the sky. The tank takes heavy damage and becomes immobile. It is completely destroyed. Now we move to a shot from another angle, showing just how strategically the Ukrainian forces chose the location for the mine. The only direction the tank can move in is directly over the mine trap, which inevitably causes the Russian tank to fall into the trap. October 18, 2024. This Russian BTR-82 vehicle carrying infantry is rapidly advancing toward the conflict zone. It is evident from the footage that the path the vehicle is traveling has been used several times before, and Ukrainian forces have been closely monitoring this route. For this reason, this route is no longer safe. Anti-tank mines were left waiting for the enemy. The BTR-82 continues its journey without stopping. The hum of the engine, the tracks leaving marks in the dirt, and the alert infantrymen on top. Everything seems like a harbinger of an impending disaster. And a few seconds later, the expected moment arrives. The vehicle strikes a hidden anti-tank mine. A violent explosion envelops the area. The armor is pierced, debris flies into the air, and flames rise. After the explosion, the BTR-82 is completely destroyed. Along with the vehicle, its crew and the infantry on board lose their lives. April 7, 2024. This Russian tank carrying 24 infantrymen is advancing through rough terrain. The difficult terrain conditions make it hard for the tank to move, yet they continue to move swiftly. The sounds of the wheels and tracks grinding against the rough ground and the surrounding earth make the progress even more difficult. However, waiting for them at the end of this tough journey is an anti-tank mine. When the tank strikes the mine, a violent explosion occurs. The tank is immediately rendered unusable. The vehicle takes heavy damage and it becomes impossible to proceed. However, there is something else that stands out after the explosion. 24 infantrymen begin to emerge from the tank. This creates a truly surprising sight, as it is quite unusual for a tank to carry such a large crew. The tank's internal space may not typically be sufficient to accommodate so many soldiers. November 16, 2022. Russian troops are advancing through the village road in Kharkiv-Rubizne. With a Russian land vehicle and an ATV following behind, they proceed down the road for a while. Then, the Russian vehicle at the front strikes a TM-62 anti-tank mine, resulting in a massive explosion. The blast triggers the ATGMs on the vehicle, amplifying the intensity of the explosion. After the explosion, a soldier exits the ATV and heads towards the blast site. Nearly nothing remains of the Russian vehicle. The lifeless bodies of the infantry are scattered across the surrounding land. The TM-62 contains around 7 to 8 kilograms of explosive material, usually TNT or its equivalent, creating a highly powerful effect. Especially when it strikes under tracked vehicles or tanks, it can tear off the tracks, break the suspension, or severely damage the tank's lower armor. For vehicles with weak lower armor, such as BMP-2 or MTLB, these mines are fatal. For tanks, while the blast often stops the vehicle's movement, it may not destroy it outright, but it can still cause injury or death to the crew. December 15, 2022. A Russian tank approaches the front line to attack Ukrainian positions. Amidst intense dust and smoke, the tank locks onto its target and begins its assault, firing several rounds in quick succession. However, in the midst of the attack, at the most unexpected moment, the tank strikes a hidden anti-tank mine. With a violent explosion, the tracks are torn off, the vehicle's underside is lifted into the air and the engine stops immediately. This sudden and devastating blow not only shocks the tank but also all the Russian forces around it. The unexpected explosion disrupts the attack plan and renders the assault force completely ineffective. September 1, 2023. This Russian tank is struck by artillery fire from a Ukrainian 2S3 KMT from the 30th Separate Mechanized Brigade. The artillery shell that hits the tank creates a massive jolt, and as a result, the tank's armor is pierced, severely affecting the crew inside. The intensity of the explosion causes some crew members to flee. Following the blast, the Russian tank tries to rapidly retreat from the area, but fate has a cruel game in store. The tank immediately strikes an anti-tank mine that had been placed there. Another violent explosion occurs. This time, the blast renders the vehicle completely unusable. The armor deforms under the force and the remaining crew inside does not survive. July 12, 2023. This Russian armored vehicle continues to maneuver rapidly despite the craters and debris around it. The terrain, disturbed by explosions and the poor road conditions, make it difficult. But the Russian vehicle continues to push forward and tries to maintain its position. Ignoring the surrounding destruction, the vehicle reverses and strikes an anti-tank mine. The blast causes severe damage to the lower part of the armored vehicle. However, this explosion not only pierces the vehicle's armor, but also triggers the ammunition inside, causing a massive secondary explosion. The intense blast scatters everything around the armored vehicle and fills the area with dense smoke and debris. The severity of the explosion completely destroys the vehicle. July 8, 2024. A Russian convoy advancing towards the area for an attack suffers heavy losses due to anti-tank mines and strategic points targeted by Ukrainian forces. Several explosions significantly cripple the convoy and the surviving Russian vehicles search for a retreat route. However, a hidden anti-tank mine obstructs the tank's movement. The tank strikes the mine and a massive explosion occurs. This blast not only tears apart the vehicle's underside but also shatters everything around it. The tank's armor cannot withstand the force of the mine, and the vehicle's ammunition is triggered, further intensifying the explosion.